Most bad property advice is not dishonest, and that's exactly why it catches people, because if it were obviously deceptive, most investors would spot it. The real problem is subtler than that. A lot of property advice is perfectly reasonable from the point of view of the person giving it, just not necessarily from the point of view of the investor who has to live with the outcome 5 or 10 years later. And once you see that clearly, a lot of the property industry stops looking confusing and starts looking, well, very predictable. Most investors walk into a deal assuming everyone around them is focused on the same thing. Long-term performance, a good asset, a clean refinance later, a sensible exit if the story were to change. But are they? Every industry runs on incentives, and property is no different. It just hides the incentive structure better because the chain is much longer. And by the time most investors are in a deal, they're not really dealing with one advisor. They're being passed through a sequence: developer, marketing company, sales consultant, broker, solicitor, management company, refurb contractor potentially, sometimes a resale agent later. Different firms, different roles, different language. From the outside, it can look like lots of independent advice. But stop for a second and ask a better question. At which point in that process is somebody paid because your investment works brilliantly in year 5? At which point are they paid because the refinance is clean, the equity is accessible, the tenant demand holds up, and the exit is easy? Usually they are not. They are paid when the deal moves. And once you see that, a lot of the industry behavior starts making sense very quickly. Why momentum gets emphasized, why awkward questions get softened, why the tone is so often, let's get this done, why conversations are built around completion, not compounding. That does not require bad people. It just requires a machine that rewards movement. See, the advice you receive is not necessarily dishonest. It's perfectly aligned, just not aligned with you. And this is where a lot of investors miss the real cost. The expensive part is rarely the obvious fee. It's the structural decision that gets normalized inside that environment. The wrong strategy for your actual goals, leverage taken at the wrong moment, a refinance that looks clever until it traps equity, an asset that looks acceptable on a spreadsheet, then later becomes awkward to mortgage, awkward to sell, or both. Those costs do not arrive as a dramatic invoice on day one. They show up later as slower growth, fewer options, weaker flexibility, and years of lost compounding. So the useful question in property is not really, are these people honest? Most of them probably are. The useful question is, when do they get paid? Do they get paid when your investment succeeds? Or do they get paid when the transaction completes? Because those two structures produce very different advice. And that is why serious investors need design before execution. Not because brokers, solicitors, agents, developers, or managers have no role. They absolutely do. But none of them are there to build the whole plan around your long-term outcome. They each handle a piece. And once the conveyor belt starts moving, it tends to keep moving, whether the strategy underneath it is right or not. So before you let anyone steer a property decision, ask a few simple questions. How do they get paid? What happens if this underperforms in 5 years? How easy is this thing to refinance or exit if the story changes? Those questions will usually tell you more than confidence, branding, or a polished sales process ever will. Because once you see this clearly, you stop judging advice by how convincing it sounds, you start judging it by what it is structurally built to optimize. And that is usually the moment people stop consuming property advice like spectators and start thinking like investors. This is one piece of a larger pattern. The Industry Decoder maps the full structure of how property advice gets shaped by who's paying for it. Worth reading if you want to see the whole machine, not just one moving part. Most bad property advice is not dishonest. It's perfectly aligned, just not with you.